Good morning, English majors. Good morning, world. I am your host for today, and you are now watching Lit Talk. Literature provides us with a medium through which to communicate our thoughts, ideas, and stories to others. In our show, simply called Lit Talk, some of our most beloved guests will share their knowledge and experience with our listeners about the many ways to approach the creation of a specific genre or style of literature. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the 7 brilliant guests who will be participating in today's program. Miss Pamela Ocharon and Miss Jean Nicole Chavez. Mr. Christian Panganiban and Miss Frances Maran Loyola. Miss Shervy Lobiano and Miss Francesca Ann Magtaan. Miss Jam Granale Marzado and yours truly me, Miss Ann Nicole Martinez.
Hey everyone, how are you all feeling today? I hope you are all doing fine. For today, I would be your first presenter about the short stories that us humans are really up to nowadays. So I am Pamela C. Ocharon and I will be introducing to you the short stories and everything about it. What is a short story? A short story is a fictional work of prose that is shorter in length than a novel. Edgar Allan Poe, in his essay The Philosophy of Composition, said that a short story should be read in one sitting, anywhere from a half hour to 2 hours. In contemporary fiction, a short story can range from 1,000 to 20,000 words. Because of the shorter length, a short story usually focuses on one plot, one main character, with a few additional minor characters, and one central themes, whereas a novel can tackle multiple plots and themes with a variety of prominent characters. Rather, that a short story should be read in one sitting, anywhere from a half hour to 2 hours, which is very true. As humans during our free times, for example, you have a 30-minute break. You can actually use the 30 minutes to scroll on your phone, on your textbooks, and read a short story. With that 30 minutes, you will be able to finish that story since the story only ranges from 1,000 to 20,000 words that you can literally read in one sitting. Stories come in all kinds of categories: action, adventure, biography, comedy, crime, detective, drama, dystopia, fable, fantasy, history, horror, mystery, philosophy, politics, romance, satire, science fiction, supernatural, thriller, tragedy, and western. Readers differs in ways they like the stories to be read. As readers, you have your own categories that you like to focus with, like the given example of categories. Me, your presenter, personally, I'd love to read short stories in genres of drama, comedy, and thriller. Just sharing. So we have different examples here: The Frog and the Mouse, Tree Love, Plot and Pan Story, and all these biographies. So now we are going to tackle the importance of a short story. Stories play a vital role in the growth and development of children. Reading also helps children with their confidence levels, coping with feelings, and language. In our everyday life, we all share stories. Stories of our family, of our studies, friends, works, and of course, our experiences in life. We share stories to explain things to ourselves and to others. It is important because it is a fundamental part of being a human. It lets us share information in a way that creates an emotional connection to whoever we are sharing to. Also, it helps us understand that information in each other in a short story is what makes it informative, meaningful, and memorable. Because stories create an emotional connection, we can gain a deeper understanding of other people's experiences on their stories. It does not only help us understand their lives, but also allow us to take the lessons they have learned and apply it to our own. Here are some examples of the importance of a short story. First is the confidence levels. Those who can read well are more likely to have higher confidence levels. Short stories help us enhance our reading skills. Of course, if you can read well, it will boost your confidence to share stories in front of your friends, family, classmates without the feeling of doubt and shyness. Second is the language and learning. Stories are a great way to introduce new words and ideas into our language, starting with picture books for the very young, working up to more complex novels for teenagers. In language learning, let us start with one aspect when learning a new language. First, of course, we'll find a new resources that fit your style. Well, short stories are incredibly easy to find. Short stories are quickly consumable that students can expose themselves to more topics and a wider range of vocabulary. It will tailor language learners even better as they are often compiled to present diverse viewpoints and styles. Third is the relaxation. Reading stories can be helpful for relaxation. Before bedtime, for example, they allow us to forget the stresses and strains of the day and indulge in fantasy for a while. Yes, it has been part of our everyday life, especially those who are an avid fan of reading. When we have our free time, we use it in reading our favorite stories that could lessen our tiredness and could clear our mind. Last is the development of imagination. Stories help to develop our imagination by introducing new ideas into their world. Of course, stories help develop one's imagination by introducing new ideas to the world. Ideas that are about fantastical world, other planets, different points in times, and invented characters. It will encourage us to realize that we can and should imagine anything we want. Here are some examples of a short story that may be already familiar to you or you have already read. The examples are The Lottery, The Necklace, The Yellow Wallpaper, Little Red Riding Hood, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, The Little Mermaid, The Ugly Duckling, and The Rapunzel. Now, we are going to the key elements of a short story. We have the characters, the setting, the plot, which contains 5 parts: the introduction or the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and the resolution or the denouement, the point of view, the theme, the conflict, and the style. These elements are important because when students can describe literary elements such as character and plot, they are better able to interpret and respond to a literary text. Focusing and discussing key details of literary elements supports the understanding of the author's message and purpose. First, we have the characters. It deals with how the characters in the story are described. In short stories, there are usually fewer characters compared to a novel. Characters serve as the driving force in every story. The characters create and push the plot forward. Readers can experience the world that an author created through characters, both from the way that the characters interact with their environment and the way that the characters views their environment. So, we have 2 types of the characters, the protagonist and the antagonist. The protagonist is the main character of the story, the one with whom the character identifies. This person is not necessarily good. The protagonist is important because he or she is the one who drives the plot forward. They are the person that the story centers around and the character readers will root for to succeed. The next is the antagonist, is the force in opposition of the protagonist. This person may not be bad or evil, but he or she opposes the protagonist in a significant. The only function of antagonist is to oppose the main character and make it more difficult for them to reach their goal. He or she doesn't necessarily have negative motivations, but the best antagonists are the ones who are just multidimensional as protagonists. So characters can also be classified as round, dynamic, static, and flat. First is the round character, a character with depth or a complex personality. This type of character seems lifelike to readers because they learn many details about them, such as their history, thoughts, emotions, and personality traits. Second is dynamic, experiences important inner growth, changing in a meaningful way by the end of the story. This type of character are those who undergo significant internal change throughout the course of a story. The development of a dynamic character is often subtle and unstated and is not due to a change in the character circumstances. Third is the static, characters that do not change at all throughout the story. This type of character are those who remains largely the same throughout the course of the storyline. Their environment may change, but they retain the same personality and outlook as they had at the beginning of the story. Lastly is the flat, usually minor characters. This type of characters lack complexity in several facts. They are often called stuck characters because they never deviate from their simple traits. These characters are often used to support the main characters. Next element is the setting. Time and place are where the action occurs. The setting is important because it gives and provides the readers with context of the time, place, and environment that the story takes place. It also improves the reader's experience and adds to the story's development with plot, mood, and characters. So here are the details that describe the settings: scenery, costumes, transportation, clothing, dialects, weather, time of day, time of year, mood, and atmosphere. Next element is the plot. Plot ensures that every important element of the story is in place to make sense to the reader and keep the story moving. It contains the conflict or the problem that the character must tackle in order to reach a successful ending. Every compelling short story must have a plot. Here are the parts of a plot: the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and the resolution. Part is the introduction or the exposition, the beginning of the story where the characters and the setting is revealed. The introduction or the exposition helps to groove the reader, viewer, listener within a work by providing context for what is about to unfold. Not only the introduction or the exposition provides clarity on character and time, but it also helps people orient themselves within the work. The second part of a plot is the rising action. This is where the events in the story become complicated and the conflict in the story is revealed. In rising action, this part of the plot creates tension or suspense and lets the audience get to know the main characters better. You'll see characters making difficult decisions, you'll see their flaws, which will help you relate to them. It gets the reader invested in the story. So, for the other elements and the rest of the report for the short story, our next presenter would be my partner, Miss Nicole Lute Chavez. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Good day, everyone. I'm Nicole Chavez and we'll continue the discussion of the elements of a short story. After the rising action, we have climax. Climax, as seen in the presentation, is the point of greatest tension or intensity in the short story, a highest point of interest and suspense. So, climax is an important part of the story arc because it is the turning point. It is the moment when everything changes and the protagonist must face their challenge. As without a climax, the story would just be a series of events with no real purpose or goal. Also, this is the most exciting and suspenseful part of the story. This is when the reader waits to see what will happen to the protagonist and what decision they will make. Next, we have falling action. Falling action is where the events and complications begin to resolve themselves. The reader knows what has happened next and if the conflict was resolved or not. So, falling action occurs after the turning point of the climax and signifies that the story's main conflict is coming to a close. Basically, it shows the aftermath of the climax and typically leads to the resolution, which is the end of the story. Falling action should include a character's reaction to the climax of the story, whether it is a protagonist, antagonist, or the supporting characters. For example, if a character overcomes obstacles in the climax, the falling action might show how that character copes up with what they've been through and address how they plan to carry on from that point on. It also lets characters learn about themselves and how they've changed by experiencing their struggles throughout this story. This can help shape them into better versions of themselves or create change in their lives that wasn't possible before falling action happened. Lastly, for the parts of plot is resolution. Resolution or denouement is the end of the story. It focuses on how the conflict is ultimately resolved. So basically, resolution is the ending. It is when the story closes and the reader is aware that the plot has come to its natural conclusion. This part of the plot ties together all the loose ends of the stories, and the reader will learn what happens to the main characters. So, if a resolution was not present in a story, the readers would be left wondering what happened at the end of the certain conflicts. It is also important because they are the last impression a reader has of a story. The individual sometimes remembers how a story is concluded easier than they remember how the story begins. However, not all stories have traditional resolutions. Some endings are subtle or ambiguous, and some can also be ended on a dramatic cliffhanger. In contrast to this, some resolutions can also end neatly and in an obvious manner. And although not all denouements or resolutions are happy or satisfying, authors should allow the readers to feel as if the story has come to a proper conclusion. Now, after discussing the plot, let's move on to the point of view. Point of view is whose eyes the story is being told. Short stories tend to be told through one character's point of view. But what does point of view mean for the readers? Writers choose to use a particular point of view for a reason. Different points of view can determine how much information the reader gets about characters or a situation. A story told by a narrator who knows what all of the characters are thinking will feel different than a story told from the perspective of just one character, and this impacts readers' experiences. Further, we have three modes of point of view, namely first person, second person, and third person. For first person point of view, the narrator tells the story from his or her own perspective. You can easily recognize first person by its use of the pronouns such as I, me, we, or us. First person offers the author a great way to give the reader direct access to a particular character's thoughts, emotions, voice, and way of seeing the world. On the other hand, second person point of view uses the pronoun you to immerse the reader in the experience of being the protagonist. It's important to remember that second person point of view is different from simply addressing the reader. Rather, the second person point of view places the reader on the playing field by putting them in the position of the protagonist, the one to whom the action occurs. Lastly is the third person point of view. This is where the narrator is someone who is not a character in the story. Third person point of view uses the pronouns he, she, him, her, they, them, and it to refer to all the characters. Third person also has different variants, and these variants are known as limited point of view and omniscient point of view. For third person limited point of view, the narrator does not have an omniscient unlimited perspective. They just have access to the thoughts and feelings of only one character. To contrast, Third person omniscient point of view means that the narrator knows all the thoughts and feelings of every character and can dip in and out of the internal life of anyone. Omniscient just means all-knowing. Now we have theme. Theme is a central topic or an abstract concept that a story explores. It is what the author is trying to convey and is usually connected to the genre. For example, if we are telling an action story, our controlling idea will involve life and death. If it's a crime story, it will be justice and injustice. And if it's a love story, our theme will be love and hate and so on. But don't confuse theme with the story's plot or moral. The plot is simply what happens in the story in the order of the story's events, and the moral is the lesson that the writer wants us to learn from the story. Let's now move on to the conflict. Conflict is a problem that must be solved, an issue between the protagonist and antagonist forces. It forms the basis of the plot. So basically, conflict is part of the narrative arc and does much to connect readers to a story or a story's characters. It involves problems or obstacles that arise within the story, both internal or in a character's mind and external caused by other characters or forces. And for external conflict, we have human versus nature, and human versus society. For human versus human, this is the conflict that most often play out between a protagonist and his or her antagonist, although it can also appear between friends or acquaintances as well. For human versus nature, this is when a character struggles to survive in a hostile environment, such as on a mountain or in a desert, ocean, or jungle, where he might face extreme cold or heat, dangerous animals, or other threats to his life. Lastly, for human versus society, this happens when a character is against his or her government or some other powerful force, including social or cultural norms. For example, if the character is going against the grain of what his or her society and people expect, or is accused of a crime he or she didn't commit. Moreover, in terms of internal conflict, we have human versus self. This type of conflict is usually caused by something external, but the battle itself takes place within. The character might fight opposing desires, such as whether to violate his moral principles for his benefit or not. In conclusion, stories without conflict, where the main character faces zero opposition, fail because they bore readers. Conflict creates tension, and tension keeps readers turning the pages and wait for something exciting. The last one for the elements of a short story is style. Style is defined as the way something is done. In literature, it applies to how something is written. It distinguishes one author from another based on how they create their literary piece. So, in literature, it is the literary element that describes the ways that the author uses words. The author's word choice, sentence structure, figurative language, and sentence arrangement all work together to establish mood, images, and meaning in the text. Style describes how the author describes events, objects, and ideas. And the style that an author uses influences how we interpret the facts that are presented. So, it is up to the author how she or he will execute the story and what strategy they will make in order to create an impactful story to the intended audience. That's all for our part, and I hope you learned something from us. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, everyone. So, we're nice, right? Yes, okay. Thanks for having us into your show, Miss Martinez. Miss Loyal and I is very excited to impart to you all of what we know about the writing conventions in essay. But before we move on to our main topic about essay, let me just give a quick question to answer. Oh, yeah, I forgot we're pre-recorded. Oh well, to answer that question, every essay has a purpose, namely, to inform, to persuade, to explain, and to entertain. So, Did any of you got the correct answer or just got the idea of what my answer is? Okay, if you do, well, congrats! You're right. Okay, now let's move on to the introduction part, shall we? Introduction. An essay is a nonfiction composition that explores a concept, argument, idea, or opinion from the personal perspective of the writer. Essays are usually a few pages, but they can also be book length. Whoa, that's kinda long. Unlike other forms of nonfiction writing like textbooks or biographies, an essay doesn't inherently require research. Literary essays are conveying ideas in a more informal way. Simple, right? Essays are just writings that we can compose without doing the research conduct method. More likely, it can come from what we know based on the topic. Okay, next. To have a more visible explanation of what is stated on the slide, let's look on the image below. The word essay comes from the late Latin exigere, meaning ascertain or weigh, which later became essayer in Old French. The late 15th century version came to mean the test, the quality of. It is the latter derivation that French philosopher Michel de Montaigne first used to describe a composition. So, below the image explains the late Latin exigere, meaning ascertain to weight, then evolved to exagium, meaning weighing. Then there comes the Old French essayer, assay, and essay. Then later on, it becomes essay to test the quality of in the late 15th century. Now we have Miss Loyola to continue our topic.
Good morning, people. Good morning, everyone. I am Frances Loyola, and I'll be sharing with you some secrets on how to write a good essay. But before that, let's understand and master the basic writing conventions. Let's then now proceed to the main writing conventions. The major writing conventions include grammar, punctuation, spelling, as well as capitalization. Each one is equally important, so the high quality of your essays is achieved by mastering all of them. Surely, you have come across unreadable text at least once in your life. Sometimes, information may be tough to understand on account of the topic's complexity, but very often, it is just poor writing. So, what are the mechanics of writing? In composition, writing mechanics are the conventions governing the technical aspects of writing, including spelling, punctuation, capitalization, and abbreviations. Getting your main points together can be a challenge, and one solution is to put together a draft of main ideas before writing. So let's then now proceed to number 1, which is the spelling. This important convention accompanies us through life. Kids learn to spell before they realize it. It happens as they start to recognize the letters and combine them to make words. Spelling refers to how we put letters together to form words. Correct spelling is an important part of successful writing since incorrect spelling can lead to confusion over meaning and gives an overall unprofessional look to a paper. Most of us occasionally make spelling errors that can be easily fixed by using some common sense strategies and learning basic spelling rules. But of course, one thing that could help you become a better speller is to use a spell checker. When writing on a computer, it is advisable to use a spell checker to find the most offensive errors. However, since spell checkers do not always accurately recognize some words, be sure to think carefully about the suggestion offered and, if necessary, consult a dictionary. When writing with a pen and paper, use your knowledge of simple spelling rules and a good reference site or book. There is no doubt that correct spelling makes all the difference. Wrong spelling is the reason why hundreds of resumes get trashed, why impressions crumble. Surely, when you read a sentence with multiple misspelled words, it is very likely that you still can understand it. However, Errors annoy and distracts you, making the process of reading unenjoyable. For the second one, we have the punctuation. This part of writing mechanics is probably the most complicated. Plenty of people, native speakers included, make a lot of punctuation errors. This is because we acquire punctuation skills gradually, while the fluency of speaking is usually picked up in early childhood. So this convention can be perfected with active learning and of course regular writing practice. Writing formally in English is more than just choosing the right words in the right order. Using punctuation in your writing helps the reader to clearly understand the message that is being conveyed. Because a wrongly used punctuation or a missing punctuation can change the entire meaning of a sentence. Punctuation primarily helps to indicate the pauses and the emphasis on certain ideas or thoughts that are discussed in the text. Particularly in academic writing, it is essential to accurately use punctuation as it helps to strengthen arguments that are made in the text. So, some of the examples of punctuations we have the period, which is the full stop, the comma, the colon, the semicolon, the apostrophe, the question mark, the exclamation point, the ellipsis, the quotation marks, the hyphen, the and dash, the m dash, the parentheses, which are the round brackets, and the block, which is the square brackets, and the braces, which are the curly brackets. So for the next one, we have the capitalization. Capitalization rules provide explanations when capital letters should be used. The simplest rule is to begin a new sentence with a capital letter. Another capitalization rule is about proper nouns, for example, first names and surnames, and pet names. It could also be used in companies and brands and places. So these things should be capitalized no matter where in a sentence they appear, because capitalization, like punctuation, helps convey information. The first word of every sentence is capitalized, signaling that a new sentence has begun. Proper nouns, like the name of a particular person, place, or thing, are capitalized to indicate uniqueness. However, it is not correct to use capitalization merely to make a word look or seem important.
Okay, it's me again. So we'll be explaining about usage. So usage includes grammar, word choice, and vocabulary. While mechanics apply only to writing, usage is a broader aspect that refers to how we use certain words to convey meaning through sentences. The usage of words in informal speech is easier to master, while writing mechanics tend to be more demanding for students. Okay, so usage can be quite confusing since it covers the grammar, word choice, and vocabulary. Let us focus on word choice and vocabulary first since we will cover grammar later. Okay, when it's time to write, you have to carefully choose words that can clearly express the idea and then decide how you will rearrange those words into phrases, sentences, and even paragraphs. Remember, a strong word choice makes it easier for readers to understand the concept. It clarifies and explains and expands ideas. Okay, now understood? Let's move on. Grammar. Grammar is linked with mechanics very closely. It means knowing how to use words and their forms to formulate a coherent sentence. There are plenty of rules one must follow. It is not enough to understand when to add ed, you should use times consistently and know the difference between them. So grammar, every student should master these basic grammar elements: sentence structure, word choice, parts of speech, phrases, and clauses. Grammar includes such parts of speech such as nouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, pronouns, conjunctions, and interjections. So, grammar, word choice, and vocabulary are in the same category in usage because using incorrect grammar can also lead to improper word choice, which then can lead to sentences being meaningless and the message being unclear, right? Okay. Using correct grammar makes listening and reading easier for others to understand and can make the communication process more enjoyable. I mean, what kind of person finds joy in communicating with others if he or she can't understand what they're saying or trying to convey, right? So that's why usage is important in writing in an essay and also when communicating with others. Now, let's move on. Writing conventions, recommendations. So language rules may differ depending on the genre and content. Surely there is a huge difference between the writing conventions in formal essays and those in text messages. So, shortened forms of words and informal phrases may be accepted by your peers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Viber, Omegle, Tinder, any other social media apps. But that won't do with teachers and professors. Always remember that formal writing is essential. So that is the reason why you should also practice writing and speaking in a formal manner. Next, writing conventions recommendations. Okay. Follow these recommendations on writing conventions for text production. Use use complete sentences. Never ever try to end your sentence without giving a clear idea because it can lead to misunderstandings and confusions to your readers. Remember that, always use complete sentences. Avoid few sentences. So, what are few sentences? A fused sentence is a type of run-on sentence in which two independent clauses are run together or fused, without an appropriate conjunction or mark of punctuation between them, such as semicolon or a period, the apostrophes. So that is the importance of commas, periods, semicolons, colons, apostrophes, which was explained by Miss Loyola. Next, if you mention someone's name the first time, it should be full. So, it should be full. Never use his or her nickname when you are mentioning a person because as per the other suggestions, it may lead to confusion to whom you are talking about in your sentences. Same as don't use shortened forms of words or abbreviations because every time you will include a place, an organization, an item, you should always call it by its full name and not as it or as a thing because it can lead to confusion to what you are describing or explaining. Pay attention to punctuation marks to avoid unnecessary troubles in reading and to avoid few sentences just like I mentioned earlier. Last but not the least, write citations correctly. Always do note the author or the person that said a specific line or created an article which you had copied an idea. Avoid plagiarism at all costs, okay? Stay in school and outside of jail. That's all on my part. Thank you.
To sum everything up, an essay should have a single clear central idea. Each paragraph should have a clear main point or topic sentence. Development. Each paragraph should support or expand the central idea or the paper. The idea of each paragraph should be explained and illustrated through examples, details, and descriptions. Writing various types of essays effectively has become important to academic achievement. Essay writing is a regular school task, a requirement for college applications, and a requirement of standardized testing. Choosing the right type of essay to write in response to a writing task is crucial to answering the question correctly in examinations. Understanding the many forms of essays will assist you in improving your writing skills. Outsourcing your work to the best essays writing service, on the other hand, ensures that your paper will be successful.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shirley Lubiana, and I will be reporting drama and its types or forms. What is drama? From the Greek word dran, which means action or play, this form of literature places emphasis on doing or acting. Words, pictures, moods, etc. come alive in a drama. In literature, a drama is the portrayal of fictional or non-fictional events through the performance of written dialogue, either prose or poetry. A piece of literature called a drama is one that is created with the intention of being performed in front of an audience. It can be on stage or theater, on film, television, or on the radio. This kind of writing is written in the form of a script, and the dialogue serves to tell the narrative, which was delivered by the actors who play the characters. Dramas are typically called plays, and their creators are known as playwrights or dramatists. Types and forms of drama in literature. Tragedy. A tragedy is a type of drama that can be described as serious in nature and often includes a catastrophic ending. Any viewing or reading audience can become moved to tears by a tragic play just by the general damp of tragic atmosphere it creates. This frequently occurs as a result of the inclusion of elements like death or suffering. For such a result or response, some filmmakers today include tragic storytelling to their plays. One example of a tragedy is Romeo and Juliet, a well-known drama by William Shakespeare. Due to the feud between their families, two young children in this play feel the need to keep their love a secret from their parents. However, their hasty decisions lead them to their death. One is comedy. Comedy is a type of drama that is written to be entertaining or amusing for the audience. This is a tragic play's antithesis. The purpose of a comedy is to generate as much laughter from the audience as possible by incorporating jokes into the discourse. Comedies are distinguished for their informal conversation and presentation. This is why overly complex and intricate narratives shouldn't be used in this kind of play because they could undermine the purpose. Next one is tragic comedy. It contains both tragedy and comedy. Mostly the characters in tragic comedy are exaggerated, and sometimes there might be a happy ending after a series of unfortunate events. It is incorporated with jokes throughout the story just to lighten the tone. So, in this type of drama, the author of the play aims to strike a balance between comedy and tragedy. The best method to accomplish this is to begin the piece in one of the styles before changing to another. The most common is the development of a fantastic humorous conclusion from a tragic beginning. Farce. A farce is a subcategory of comedy. These low comedies include ridiculous and slapstick comedic situations in order to create humor for the audience. So, due to the usage of humor and jokes, this could be misunderstood for a comedy. However, the main distinction is the excessive exaggeration employed to produce a farce, which results in less effort being put into producing an accurate plot than that of producing laughs. The playwright's goal is to make enough observed characters and settings that the audience will be uninterested in anything else. Melodrama. While it originally referred to dramas that included accompanying music, melodramas now refer to plays that include highly emotional situations in order to play on the feelings of the audience. Melodramas were originally theatrical plays that incorporate music and speech. The term melodrama originates from a combination of the Greek melos, meaning melody or song, and the French word drame, meaning drama. Melodrama is a type of theatrical work in which the characters, events, and plot are exaggerated in order to evoke intense emotional responses from the audience. Melodramas are characterized by overblown narratives rather than rich character development in the literature, theater, and film. Stereotypical roles are frequently assigned to melodrama characters. Conflicts are frequently sensationalized to highlight characters over the top feelings and performances. Next is opera or musical drama. Musical dramas refer to plays in which characters engage in dialogue but also include scenes in which the passion of the character is so great he expresses himself in song. Instead of using dialogue, this type of theater uses songs and musical numbers. The music chosen must be able to properly communicate the character's ideas to the viewing audience. One example of a musical drama is The Phantom of the Opera by Andrew Lloyd Webber, which tells a story about obsession and a musical talent with deformities who haunts the Paris Opera. Young soprano Christine has a skill and beauty that mesmerizes the Phantom, who recruits her as his protege and falls head over heels in love with her. Mime. This is also known as drama without active speech. The characters here convey their message with expressions, gestures, and sounds. Physical movements and dance numbers can be used here as long as there isn't any speech involved.
Good morning to each and every one of you. To continue the report about the topic of drama, I'll be discussing more about the dramatic conventions along with famous dramatists. I'm Francesca Magtaan and I hope that you can learn more from our discussion. To start, I'll be discussing dramatic conventions. A convention is a technique employed regularly in the drama so that the audience come to attach specific meaning to it. When a technique is used repeatedly in a drama, the audience recognize its significance. They buy into it as an established way of telling the story. These dramatic conventions are a set of rules both the audiences and the actors are familiar with, and which serves as a useful way of quickly signifying the nature of the action or a character. These are also known as drama techniques or drama strategies. For example, a dramatic convention in Shakespeare is that a character can move downstage to deliver a soliloquy which cannot be heard by the other characters on stage. Nor are characters in a musical surprised by another character bursting into song. One more example would be how the audience accepts the passage of time during a play, or how music will play during a romantic scene. Now, let's get to know about some examples of dramatic conventions that I was able to find. First among these is letter A, the prologues, which is the introductory part of the play, which serves as an initial situation, as it foreshadows the events and gives the play's background. It could take the form of an opening scene, a speech, or an address. Prologues have the objective of preparing the audience, introducing the actions and characters. Of course, if we have discussed the beginning part or the prologues, we're going to also be discussing about the ending part, which can be referred to as the epilogues. This is the direct opposite of the prologue. It is presented at the end of the play and it sums up the action of the play and in some cases makes a statement, an advice or a lesson to be learned on the action or events presented in the play. An epilogue is an optional final chapter of a story, such as in a play or book, and in which may serve a variety of purposes, concluding or bringing closure to events, wrapping up loose ends, reporting the eventful fates of the characters after the main story, commenting on the events that have unfolded, and or setting up a sequel. It can appear as a speech, especially in a play, a series of scenes, or an essay by the narrator. The next convention is something that is used to provide entertainment for the audience in between the scenes. These are called the interludes. Similar to the prologue and epilogue, it is an address presented between the different acts or scenes. In some plays, the interlude can include some brief presentations and entertaining shows. Interludes, as the name suggests, came in between events to provide witty entertainment to the audience. Usually, they are very short and use the topics of politics or religious issues, but this was done in a rather funny manner. Therefore, they are considered as secular farces. They were performed by professional actors either between the acts of a long play or during a feast, where entertainment was required. The fourth dramatic convention is called the soliloquies. This is a dramatic device which was very common during the Renaissance years. A soliloquy is used to reveal the thoughts or the feelings of some characters, especially the central characters. It serves as a subjective narrative perspective as it allows the characters to speak aloud, and it is equally used to provide commentaries on major events of the play. The purpose of a soliloquy is for the character to express their inner thoughts and feelings that are not intended to be heard or known by the other characters in the play or the audience members. Essentially, during a soliloquy, the action of the play stops, as if time has paused for the audience to be inside the speaker's head for a moment while they articulate what they are thinking. This is effective as a literary device in terms of providing insight into a character's emotions and reflections. The next convention is called dialogue, and as we all know, it's the conversation of characters in a literary work. In plays, characters' speech is preceded by their names. It's more than just the exchange of words between the characters. The dialogue is core to the drama, for it is the dialogue delivered by characters that moves the plot and action along, provides exposition, and defines the distinct characters. The dialogue spoken by a particular character reflects his or her sociocultural background, place of origin, temperament, attitudes to other characters, and so on. In connection to the dialogue, we have the convention monologue, which is a speech by a single character without another character's response. The character, however, is speaking to someone else, or even a group of people. A monologue is an extended speech uttered by one speaker, either to other or as if he or she is alone. Some modern plays in which only one character speaks are known either as monodramas or as monologues. After that, we have stage direction. It's the playwright's descriptive or interpretive comments that provide readers as well as the actors and directors with information about the dialogue, setting, and action of a play. Modern playwrights tend to include substantial stage directions, while earlier playwrights typically used them more sparsely, implicitly, or not at all. Stage directions are instructions in the script of a play that tell actors how to enter, where to stand, when to move, also information about the lighting, scenery, props, and sound effects. Stage directions give vital information for the action and relationships between people, things, and places inside the play script. They also can be used to tell an actor how to shape his or her performance. Finally, the last dramatic convention that we'll be discussing is the staging, which is the spectacle a play presents in performance, including the position of the actors on stage, the scenic background, the props and costumes, and the lighting and sound effects. Staging in drama means the process or manner of putting a play on stage. This refers to the positioning of the characters and the props, the way the actors move, the way they use their voice, and how the character looks, which involves their costumes. In addition to that, there's also the consideration of what kind of lighting is suitable for the events that are being shown, as well as appropriate sound effects supplemental to the scenes, which adds more dramatic effect with the acting and the dialogues. Moving on, we'll now be discussing about those who are regarded as famous dramatists in the field. First on the list is the person we all are familiar with, and he is William Shakespeare, who is widely regarded as the greatest writer of the English language and the world's greatest dramatist. He wrote over 39 plays, 154 sonnets, 3 long narrative poems, and many other works. To this day, countless theater festivals around the world honor his work. Students or learners just like us study his pieces, and there's no denying that he's a very influential figure in the field of literature. Shakespeare remains relevant because his plays present people and situations that we recognize today. His characters have an emotional reality that transcends time, and his plays depict familiar experiences, ranging from family squabbles to falling in love to war. He also had more insight into characters' feelings and motives, and cleverer handling of light and dark, change of pace, and the weighing up of right and wrong. To discuss, one of his most well-known work is entitled Hamlet, a tragedy written sometime between 1599 and 1601. It is Shakespeare's longest play, with 29,551 words. The play depicts the revenge that Prince Hamlet seeks to impose upon his uncle Claudius, who killed Hamlet's father, who seized the throne, and married his dead brother's wife. His other works include Macbeth, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Othello, and Romeo and Juliet. The next dramatist on the list is Anton Chekhov, who is considered to be one of the greatest writers in the world, known as one of the most important contributing figures to modernism in theater. He is best known in modern-day Russia for his numerous short stories, many of which are believed to be masterpieces of the form. But his plays are also great influences on 20th century theater. From Chekhov, many contemporary playwrights have learned how to use smooth, apparent trivialities and inaction to shed light on the inner psychology of characters. Chekhov's four major plays include The Seagull, Uncle Vanya, The Three Sisters, and The Cherry Orchard, which are repeatedly reproduced in modern productions. To discuss, The Steep is what established his reputation, telling the unforgettable tale of a boy's journey to a new school in Kiev, traveling through majestic landscape towards an unknown destiny. Next on the list is Oscar Wilde, who was a poet and dramatist who was a major spokesman for the aesthetic movement in late 19th century England, which focused on the idea of art for art's sake. He was an active dramatist, writing what he identified as trivial comedies for serious people. His plays were popular because their dialogue was clever and often epigrammatic, relying on puns and elaborate word games for their effects. Wilde wrote perhaps his most famous play, The Importance of Being Earnest, at the height of his fame and popularity. The comedic farce satirized Victorian social obligations and the institution of marriage. His short statement in his preface to The Picture of Dorian Gray expresses one of the central aspects of the idea of art for art's sake. Art shall have no other aim than being art, and it should be protected from subordination to any moral, didactic, social, or political purpose. Some of his other most well-known works include The Ballad of Reading Gaol, Requiescat, and The Happy Prince. Second to the last on the list is Arthur Miller, who was a 20th century American playwright known for combining social awareness with his characters' inner lives. He is regarded as one of the most important American playwrights of the 20th century, and his work continues to be widely performed and studied around the world. Miller has written nearly about 30 plays in his career as a dramatist. All of his work takes social forces into consideration and mirror his view that people should take individual as well as social responsibility in order to bring balance to our society and avoid a jungle environment. To discuss, one of his major plays, Death of a Salesman, is a tragedy set in New York City in the 1940s, told through a montage of memories. It follows a traveling salesman, Willie Loman, as he struggles to survive in a success-driven society. It explores the place of an everyday man in society and the pressures of the American dream. Some of his other most well-known works include The Crucible, All My Sons, A View from the Bridge, and The Misfits. Finally, the last on the list, we have Albert Camus, who was well known as being an essayist, novelist, and playwright who focused his work on leftist causes. He received the 1957 Nobel Prize for Literature. Camus began his literary career as a playwright and theater director and was planning new dramatic works for film, stage, and television at the time of his death. In addition to his 4 original plays, he also published several successful adaptations, including theater pieces based on works by Faulkner, Dostoevsky, and Calderon. He took particular pride in his work as a dramatist and man of the theater. His work, Caligula, is the story of a superior suicide. It is the story of the most human and the most tragic of errors, unfaithful to man, loyal to himself. Caligula consents to die for having understood that no one can save himself all alone, and that one cannot be free in opposition to other men. Some of his other most well-known works include The Stranger, The Plague, The Fall, The Myth of Sisyphus. That would be all for the topic of drama. Thank you for listening to this topic. I hope you learned new things from us discussants.
Hello everyone, I am Javian Marzado or Jam Marzado. Me and Miss Martinez are going to talk about the literary conventions of a poetry. But before knowing its conventions, we need to know first what is poetry. The word poem comes from the Greek word poema, which was an early variant of poema, meaning fiction, poem. A poem is a language organized in lines in order to form a stanza. Every poem is an expression of human sentiment, sometimes happy, sometimes bitter, sometimes casual. Since the poem is an utterance, it always has a speaker and some motivation or provocation for the utterance. And these are some of the literary conventions of poetry. And its main focus is the structure. The first one for the structure is the poetic line. Poetic line are the words that form a single line of poetry. For example, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. The line, two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and having perhaps the better claim is an example of a line. Poetic line is a line, single line of text from left to right. And note that a line isn't always a complete sentence. Sometimes the poet will break a sentence up. The next one is the stanza. It is a part of a poem with number of lines or group of lines in a poem separated by a space. As you can see in the presentation, the one in the box is a stanza, stanza number 1. The one in the other box is also a stanza, stanza number 2. And there are 10 different forms of stanzas. Monostich for 1 line, couplet for 2 lines, tercet for 3 lines, quatrain for 4 lines, quintain for 5 lines, sestet, septet, octet, nonet or Spenserian for 9 lines, and dizaine for 10 lines. And in the poem The Road Not Taken, it has 4 stanzas and consists of 5 lines, which means it is a quintain. The next one is Enjambment, a poem having no natural pause in a line. It is best to exemplify when it does not have any comma or period at the end of each line. So, in enjambment, it requires the reader to read through a poem's line break, each lines, without pausing in order to understand the conclusion of the thought or idea. Like, for example, Knoxville, Tennessee by Nicky Giovanni. As you can see, there is no written or natural pause at the end of the lines. So the word flow carries over to the next line. The next one is blank verse. It is a type of poetry written in a regular meter that does not contain rhyme. So, blank verse poetry has no fixed number of lines. It has a conventional meter that is used for verse drama and long narrative poems. It is often used in descriptive and reflective poems and dramatic monologues, the poems in which a single character delivers his thought in the form of a speech, just like William Shakespeare's To Be or Not to Be from Hamlet. Last one for the structure is a free verse. It is a poetry that does not rhyme or have a regular meter. For example, is A Noiseless Patient Spider by Walt Whitman. As you can see in the poem, it does not have a regular meter or rhyme. It does not follow a proper rhyme scheme. This type of poem is based on normal pauses and natural rhythmical phrases, as compared to the artificial constraints of normal poetry.
Proceeding to the next topic, I am going to discuss the sound. Let us begin with the rhythm. The rhythm is the basic beat in a line of a poem. The definition of rhythm in poetry is the recurrence of specific sounds based on long and short patterns of stressed and unstressed syllables. Specifically, poetry in verse form. Beats in a poem are what provide the rhythm, which is determined by the ear and has to do with the poem's tempo and structure, giving it a specific beat. Example given is Daffodils by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. This poem is presented in a fairly simple form, consisting of 4 stanzas with 6 lines each. This 24-line poem exemplifies the iambic tetrameter style. This form is specifically employed by the poet who wishes to generate light, carefree mood for their piece, making the poem easily accessible to multiple audiences. Proceeding to the meter. The meter is a pattern of stressed and unstressed, accented and unaccented syllables known as foot in a line of a poetry. Meter is the rhythmic structure of a line made up of 2 or more syllables and the pattern of emphasis or lack of emphasis on each of the syllables. A poetic foot is a unit of meter. The most common metrical feet are iambic, trochaic, spondaic, anapestic, and dactylic. The example is Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer day? The example basically shows the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. The stressed are the bold syllables. The bold syllables establishes a predictable means of emphasis. Here are the types of meter. Trochee, which is rarely used in English poetry, might be mixed with iambs for a harsh effects. Trochee is a stressed syllables followed by unstressed syllables. Iamb, which is a commonly used in English poetry, unstressed syllable followed by stressed syllable. Proceeding to spondy, this is a rarely used, very restrictive meter, usually found in anomaly within another meter. Spondy is equal stress for both syllables. While dactyl, poems composed entirely of dactyls are rare. Dactyls are stressed syllable followed by two unstressed syllables. Lastly is the anapest, which allows for strong rhymes. This is two unstressed syllables followed by a stressed syllable. And now moving on to the end rhyme. End rhyme, the similarity of sounds in the end of each line. The end rhyme is easily recognizable by readers and is often used to define the genre. However, it is not as popular as it used to be, as most contemporary poets either use another type of rhyming or avoid it altogether. The example given is the King of Cats sends a postcard to his wife by Nancy Williard. Keep your whiskers crisp and clean. Do not let the mice grow lean. Showing the end of rhyme at the end of each line using the word clean and lean, sounding similar and pleasing to read for the readers. After discussing the end rhyme, let's proceed to the rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhyme in a poem. A rhyme scheme is the ordered pattern of rhyming words at the end of each line of a poem. This pattern is labeled using capital letters, such as the common ABABABAB rhyme scheme or ABA, BCB, CDC, DED, EEABA, BCB, CDC, DED, EE for a terza rhyme, or ABABBCB, CABABBCBC for a ballad. Here is the work of William Shakespeare in Sonnet 18, clearly showed the rhyme scheme as the pattern of the rhyming words shows at the end of each line. The pattern is ABAB, CDCD, EFEF, and GG. And lastly, for the assonance, the repetition of consonant words within words in a line. The assonance is a poetic device that takes place in poetry where there is a repetition of identical or similar vowels sound between syllables or nearby words in the same line of a poem, especially in a stressed syllable. The example here is 1. The light of the fire is a sight, which the repetition for the long I sound. Second is go slow over the road, the repetition of the long O sound. Third is Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, the repetition of the short E and the long I sounds. For fourth, Sally sells seashells beside the seashore, the repetition of the short E and the long E sounds. Lastly, the fifth is try as I might, the kite did not fly, the repetition of the long I sounds. So that's it. I hope you understand my topic, which is the sound. Thank you for listening.
Our topic is about the literary conventions of short story, essay, drama, and poem. Short stories comes in all kinds of categories: action, adventure, biography, comedy, and so on. Short story plays a vital role in the growth and development of children. It builds their confidence, helps in learning language, for relaxation, and it helps develop imagination. Short story has key elements: the character, setting, plot, point of view, theme, conflict, and style. For the essay, it is a non-fiction composition, and there are types of essay: narrative, descriptive, expository, argumentative, persuasive, and compare and contrast. For drama, drama is a portrayal of fictional and non-fictional events through the performance of written dialogue. And there are types of drama in literature: tragedy, comedy, tragic comedy, farce, melodrama, opera, and mime. Dramatic conventions includes prologues, epilogue, interludes. Last one is the poetry. It is a language organized in lines in order to form a stanza. And that's all. Thank you.